y'all. Welcome to another episode of Soccer for Us. I am Bart, and on this episode, we are talking about the home stadiums of the U.S. men's national team and why it's a problem that they are concentrated to a certain group of not just states, but also cities. But before we get into that conversation, I need to ask two favors of you. First, Soccer Down Here, the network on which I put out my podcast, is a finalist for the Football Content Awards as a Best Media Organization. We're in the category of broadcaster or media rights holder. We are just a collection of folks who love soccer in the South and would greatly appreciate your support going up against actual professional broadcast media rights holders. So if you can, take a second to go vote for Soccer Down Here at footballcontentawards.com/voting. So that would be awesome. And also, don't forget, you can follow this podcast on Twitter at Soccer for Us Pod and support us at buymeacoffee.com/Soccer for Us Pod. All right, now that that's said, let me introduce our two guests for tonight. You know one of their voices very well. He's been a partner with me on this podcast for quite some time now. It is the greatest historian on USMNT Twitter, Thomas, a.k.a. US Keeper Thomas. Good evening.
Good evening, Bart. How are you?
You know, I am recovering from some refereeing this weekend, but I am great. Always fun to be able to be involved in the game.
Well, sounds good. Glad to be here.
And also joining us, a new voice on the podcast, but someone who is not a stranger to having his voice, not just on a podcast, but also in press conferences for U.S. Soccer. It is Lawrence Dockery from the Memphis 901 podcast, Bluff City Media, and a lot of other outlets. Lawrence, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Yes, I've made my voice heard in a press conference before, and it did set the internet on fire for about 2 days, which was fun for the first day, and by the second day I was worn out. I was worn out from it.
Well, glad to have you on here. And as I kind of said, we are talking about U.S. men's national team, just men's national team. We'll talk a little bit about the women, but we're focused on the men's national team stadium selection. So you may not know, but we are heading into October of 2024. The U.S. men's national team has 4 more matches remaining, 2 of those at home. And to play those matches, they're returning to 2 cities and stadiums that they have played in within the calendar year, actually. I mean, they played these stadiums at least within the last 13 months. Those cities and stadiums are Austin's Q2 Stadium, which is set to host its 5th men's national team match since opening in just 2021. And then St. Louis's City Park is going to host its 3rd match in just 2 years. I think most people on U.S. Soccer Twitter recognize this as somewhat of a problem. The problem being that U.S. men's national team fans feel that U.S. Soccer is, I don't know, not selecting a broad enough or a diverse enough array of cities and stadiums. And while we all agree that friendly confines help teams win, familiarity can often breed contempt. And I think it's safe to say that right now, U.S. men's national teams and women's national team fans feel that U.S. soccer is a bit too familiar with certain locations for their matches. And that is definitely sowing resentment. Simply put, U.S. soccer isn't letting the nation see the national team. Thomas, I'm going to start with you because you have a spreadsheet that I'm looking at right now that breaks down all-time locations, and then you were kind enough to group it for me by decades since the turn of the century. The question I think has to be asked: is this a new problem that U.S. soccer seemingly has just a handful of states and cities that they select to play matches in?
I don't think it's a new problem, Bar. I think they get comfortable. I mean, if you go back to 2000 to 2009, you look at the states they played in, they play a lot in California and a lot in Massachusetts, Foxborough specifically. And you look at their success in Massachusetts and California during that decade. I mean, they lost one match in each of those states, and they played one played 22 matches, and the other one played 16 matches. And so when you're losing one match in those venues, in those states, in those areas, U.S. Soccer gets comfortable with that. They say the team's comfortable there, the players are comfortable there, right? So why not continue going there, right? And so there is a pattern of that, that far back, and probably that's, I mean, it could be even further, but that's really when things started to try to change for them, and making the players comfortable, making the situation comfortable for setup and how they roll it out.
Yeah, Lawrence, that's a good point that Thomas makes as a success maybe at certain locations. Look, since 2020, Texas has hosted 10 matches, Ohio has hosted 6, Florida 5, Florida 5, California 5, and then Kansas 5, Missouri 4. Now, I'm going to play with the numbers a little bit there and say Missouri has hosted 9 because let's be honest, it's Kansas City. Kansas is basically Missouri. But they've been fairly successful, especially when you look at a lot of those choices were made with both World Cup qualifying and Nations League in mind. So, yes, U.S. Soccer wants to go play in facilities that they feel they will have success. But is that really the best way to choose a friendly location, which we've seen is, this year maybe a little bit more diverse, but still this fall it's not very diverse at all.
No. And so I do understand the concept of when you have a home World Cup qualifying game, you want to ensure maximum home field advantage, which, let's be real, has historically, until probably the beginning of the early 2000s, when they started playing games at what is now known as historic Crew Stadium, home field advantage was not something we ever enjoyed on a regular basis. So I understand the desire and perhaps the necessity of playing in places where you can guarantee home field advantage. We are in the middle of a cycle now where we don't have to worry about World Cup qualifying. We're the host nation. And yet we continue to cycle through Children's Mercy Park in Kansas City, TQL Stadium in Cincinnati, Q2 Stadium in St. Louis, and I'll bet my bottom dollar at some point next year they'll end up at Exploria Stadium in Orlando. And this is not a knock on those venues. This is not a knock on the support the team has gotten in those venues or the results they've gotten. But as you said, this is the national team, the nation. That's the key word there. And that's the root word of national is nation. The national team needs to be accessible to maybe not the whole nation. I don't think we should be playing a game in Alaska anytime soon, but more people need to be able to see this team. And that should be a fundamental tenet, but especially now more than ever that you are hosting a home World Cup in less than 2 years. And if you want it to be as big of a success as possible, you need to get as many different nooks and crannies and small towns and mid-sized cities across the country excited for the World Cup. Because one thing this is not to suggest that the World Cup will be a disaster if the U.S. men's national team doesn't play a friendly the year before in Louisville or Memphis or wherever. It's the World Cup. It's going to be a success. It would take just disaster beyond comprehension to make a World Cup not a success. But one of the things that gets talked about the 1994 World Cup is, yes, it's still the most attended World Cup of all time by a wide margin. And it did incredible amounts for the game in this country. But what you hear and what you don't necessarily think about until somebody brings it up is, yes, the crowds were great, and we had never seen crowds like that before, and really to an extent haven't seen many of them quite like that since then. That was it. It was the crowds were big, and then everybody went home at the end of the day. This was not, it was a big deal in like 6 cities. And not every city in this country is hosting games. Not every city is getting fan fests or warm-up friendlies or any of that. So U.S. Soccer, it's in their mission statement to grow the game. taking the national team to a place where you either have not been in a long time or have never been, I feel like is a great way to go about growing the game. And I will point out a contemporary, as in within the next month example. Local media attention is everything. And the U.S. women's national team is playing a game in Louisville next month at Lynn Family Stadium, one of the premier soccer-specific stadiums in the USL Championship. The U.S. men's team has never played in Louisville. The U.S. women's team, I think, has played there 3 times and not since 2004, and they played at the University of Louisville's football stadium.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're playing in a soccer-specific stadium, which has hosted club friendlies. The NCAA Final Four national championship game was in Louisville last year. So like the city is a potential base camp for a team at the 2026 World Cup.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a lot of family there. I follow a lot of media outlets there. And when U.S. Soccer said, the U.S. women, you just won your gold medal, you're going to play in Louisville, local media in Louisville went wild for 3 or 4 days, like wall-to-wall, nonstop interviews with X, Y, and Z. And so if you're a person in Louisville that doesn't know a whole lot about soccer and you see all of this, that's what gets you interested. That's what brings you in. And you're like, oh my God, we're hosting a World Cup in 2 years. And then we've got the Olympics here 2 years after that. Like that's how you grow the game, is you take the game to people who don't normally get a chance to see it.
For the record, my groan is because my team, West Virginia, lost in the semifinal of that men's college cup up in Louisville. I had tickets purchased for that championship game. Thomas, I think what Lawrence is talking about, and you and I have talked about both on and off air, is bringing the game to the nation. Obviously, the idea of using the men's national team to drive not just hype for the World Cup coming up, but then to hopefully, plant seeds of not just support for the men's national team, but soccer as a whole in some untouched areas. So I'm going to go through some more stats because I think this goes to our point, right? I said Texas, Ohio, California, Florida, and Kansas, Missouri, right? Which way you're looking at it. Well, all but Ohio are hosting World Cup matches, right? So there's that. And Ohio is not a stranger to getting big-time U.S. men's national team matches or even big-time, they're hosting Club World Cup in Cincinnati next summer. They get a lot of Gold Cup matches.
They hosted the 2003 Women's World Cup.
And they did, yeah. So, Thomas, I mean, I think that's kind of the point we're talking about here, right? Is the places we're playing the most are going to be the ones who are highlighted and showcased during the World Cup. And of course, they're probably going to continue to get, soccer games and hype and all these things for not just the men's national team, but for soccer. But can you find a way to grow the game with the men's national team? And I think that is kind of the issue here. And I think is kind of a historic issue for U.S. soccer, is the places that soccer is big is the only places they seem to go to play.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I think now is an opportunity to, hey, we got a new manager, big name, maybe, if there's a fear that you're not going to make the revenue or bring in enough players, look, they fail all the time with that. I mean, it's like
the only sellout this year is the one they played in San Antonio, which was a new stadium and city that they haven't played in San Antonio for damn ever
9 years.
And that was a new stadium. So Thomas, right? Like it's not like they're selling out everywhere they go. I mean, they had decent enough crowds for Copa America, but your only sellout is at an 8,000 seat stadium. Like,
well, that's the problem. That's the problem. I think U.S. soccer has an issue when you talk about the ability to maximize revenue and maximize attendance. And so fans want that experience. Players want that experience. So if you're not able to do that in these bigger stadiums, then maybe, and you're going back and it's retreads, right? Like fans are like, catch it next time. And so now you have a little bit more of a draw with the coach. And I think that's something that they have to leverage. You know what I mean? Leverage that, bring that soccer to different areas, see what you can pull into it, because they're missing out.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's worth noting that the the two friendlies in September, both in Kansas City and in Cincinnati. Kansas City had 9,000, a little bit more than that. Cincinnati had about 15 and change, well below those venues capacities. But it is, you can understand a little bit that maybe not everyone's wanting to go see a substitute teacher lead a group of guys who got grouped at the gold at the Copa America. But at the same time, you had just played in Kansas City like a month and a half.
Literally the game before. Literally,
yeah, right. These same fans
before.
Watch this team lose to Uruguay and get grouped at the Copa America. There was a NWSL Kansas City Current game going on across the river the same day. I think that same afternoon, actually, even. And then for Cincinnati, I mean, we talked about it. It's not like they're any stranger to it. They've hosted 4 matches since 2020. And to be fair to Cincinnati, a lot of those matches, have been somewhat important matches. And to try to pitch you $50 for a ticket to see a team without a coach is a little unfair. Now, I do have to say that so far we on track this particular decade to be the most, if you will, diverse array of stadium selections this century. Now, Thomas, your point about playing in California and Massachusetts, one, Foxborough was a beloved location because, I think it's fair to say Robert Kraft is a great supporter of soccer. And then California has tons of soccer stadiums, but also great weather. But Lawrence, we have 23, 24 soccer-specific stadiums now in MLS, plus, as you mentioned, Louisville and some others in USL, some that are being built. So you have a lot more just infrastructure to pick from. You don't have to go to Cal State Fullerton to play a soccer game because it's, the only thing that has a wide enough pitch. You have locations to choose from. So when you look at, yes, it's a little bit more diverse, if you will, but it seems like they're still not really leveraging all the resources they have in 2024.
And one thing that you mentioned that I do want to touch on is this weird, bizarro notion from U.S. soccer that if it's not a U.S. soccer controlled event, then it wasn't real. It didn't happen, right? We just talked about them playing a friendly in Kansas City right after they played, like literally right after they played a Copa America game in Kansas City. And U.S. soccer will tell you, well, we didn't pick Copa America to go to Kansas City. No, but after you had your Copa America group stage schedule, you still picked Kansas City to host a friendly. Like, did that Copa America game just not happen? I know Thomas is up in the New England area, right? The U.S. men's national team has not played at Gillette Stadium in Foxborough since 2015, a friendly against Brazil. They hosted a Gold Cup game against Haiti a month and a half, 2 months before that friendly against Brazil. Obviously, U.S. soccer will tell you we don't pick the Gold Cup venues. If we were to just pick that apart, I think we might lose all cabin pressure for the night. But like it's quite frankly, it's asinine from U.S. soccer to act A, like they have no say in Gold Cup venues, but B, to sit here and say, hey, this game that we just picked today is the same city as this other event that we didn't have any control over. But like, look at the calendar, guys. It's really not hard. You may not have picked Copa America or Gold Cup or World Cup, which, by the way, does anybody remember Greg Berhalter after coming out and saying, yeah, we told FIFA we're going to play in LA, and Seattle. And FIFA said,
yeah, he
cool.
said they wanted to say West Coast. Right. Yeah.
No, can you imagine, FIFA is the law. They're like, it's our way or the highway. And U.S. soccer got to pick the world, not just friendly, the World Cup venues that they wanted. And FIFA was like, yeah, sure, go ahead. So you mean to tell me that you have no sway at CONMEBOL or CONCACAF, and you have no control over where those venues get picked, which is why you always happen to play in venues that you always want to play in anyway. But it's asinine to say we don't have any control over this, but then you put a game right there,
Yeah.
right after the fact. They did that, like I mentioned, like Copa America and a friendly this year, Gold Cup and friendly in Foxborough in 2015. And one of the things about that drives me crazy is you mentioned,
They
we've
did.
already had.
Hold on, they did that in St. Louis last year.
They did that exactly. They did. I can't
I
believe I
mean,
forgot about that.
they got the Gold Cup, and then they had a
Gold
friendly
Cup
the
and
next
then a
against
friendly 2 months
Uzbekistan.
later.
That
Exactly.
15,000
And
people filled it up. That's the point, right?
you mentioned it specifically to Cincinnati, where they've hosted some big games. Why am I going to spend $85 to go to a friendly with an interim boss? And we see this happen on a
It's New
micro.
Zealand, by the way.
We see this happen on a more micro level with the U.S. women's national team. Again, CONCACAF controls the scheduling. We don't have anything to do with it. When there is Olympic qualifying or World Cup qualifying tournaments played for the women's team here in the U.S., and the women's team will play 3 group stage games in the same stadium in the space of 7 days.
Which is definitely chosen by CONCACAF. I think that is like CONCACAF wants to minimize that because they're cheap and they think
there's that aspect of it. But why would you go to the Wednesday night game when you can make the Saturday afternoon game? So you're playing too many games in the same space in such a short period of time. You're going to pick one or the others. You're not going.
We saw in the most recent W Gold Cup, by the way, right? The best attended game was the USA Mexico game because of course it was. I mean, Thomas, you've got a daughter. If they were to play 3 games in Fox, well, actually, you would probably take your daughter all 3 games, but a normal human,
true sickos like us,
would pick one. But that's the point, right? Like we look at to build on that, you look at what we just had this year specifically. So we opened the year in San Antonio. Fine, whatever, new stadium. I get it from like.
I like it.
Also, it didn't turn out this way, but in theory, the weather should have been a little bit better for a January friendly. You don't want to play. No offense, Thomas. You don't want to play up in Portland, Maine, for a Camp Cupcake friendly. But I get that. But then you played 2 matches in Arlington because CONCACAF chose that for
Mexico,
the Nations League finals, right?
Mexico
and then
money.
You got and which by the way, they didn't sell out those either. And then you played in Arlington, Texas again for your opener for Copa America, which I don't have a problem with. Look, it's a big stadium, centrally, like whatever. I understand why it's chosen and why it's going to be there for those types of games. But then you choose to come to Austin in October, and I think that's the issue that we're getting at, is that to Lawrence's point, it's yes, CONCACAF, CONMEBOL, FIFA definitely they select the venues, right? They say these are the selection of venues we want. And US Soccer goes, well, we'd like to play here. And maybe that's, I don't know which part is the egg and the chicken, but there's a collaborative effort of picking those venues for the US men's national team. So why didn't we then go back to Texas? In total, we have played in Texas 4 times this year, 5 total matches, right? And that's, I just think, where we're getting at is yes, there are some reasons behind the choices, but Thomas, it's like you could still have picked different place to play for example, the friendly coming up in October against Panama at home,
Yeah, I go back to the fact that they're just comfortable with the process, with the stadium, how the setup goes. I mean, I think there was a video several years back about like the process of like that U.S. Soccer goes through to when they get to the stadium, because they've got to put all their U.S. Soccer stuff around the stadium. They've got to
literally, it's like, oh, you got the specs for the banners. Is that it?
Right. And so for them, it's easier, right? They probably have the people involved that know how to do that, and they do it very well. And so to them, they don't really want to put that extra effort in to that, to it. And again, I've said this for a long time. You have to make these friendlies, especially the ones heading into the World Cup, a special event. I said I was all for doing like, a special edition jersey for every single one of these matches, right? Like if you're worried about the revenue, you can get creative, U.S. Soccer, and do this, right? Like people want to spend money on unique kits from 50 years ago, 100
Bring
years
back
ago.
the denim jerseys.
Right. You know what I mean? And I suspect they'll do that for the World Cup. But if you're not, roll it out now. Get that hype out there. Get some. You want some money? Nike can roll these things out. They're not that complex, and you're only going to have so many sizes, so many colors for the venues. Just make it an event, and that's the thing. I think they're just missing an opportunity to kind of like make the couple days they are in that city an event for the fans and for the players.
Mm-hmm.
And to that point, if you remember during the home World Cup qualifying games for the 2014 World Cup in Brazil, it may have just been the Hex home games. I don't remember if it was the semifinal round home games or two, but the night before each of those 5 home games, I don't know if you want to call it a pep rally. I don't know if you want to call it a meet and greet. I don't know if you want to call it a get together, but Jurgen Klinsmann and select players would go to some venue in town, and all of these fans flocked there and showed up and filled the place up. And those crowds looked and sounded great on TV, and they were great on paper. And that is something that has been missing. And to your point, Thomas, I think that would go a long way towards making it an event rather than just, hey, we're here, come see us, bye, we're leaving.
Give us your money, come to the stadium, give us more money in the stadium, and then leave. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think that can go hand in hand with what I mentioned earlier about local media in new or different cities driving this.
Yeah. Even if it's a stadium that you just haven't been to in a long time, right? Those can still be exciting things, right? I want to run through some of the reasons, maybe they can be excuses, if you will, that this phenomenon exists. Not really a phenomenon, this situation exists. And then I'll let you two kind of pick it apart. So the first one that I actually do think has some legitimate reasons for why, there's a half of the country basically they don't pick is time zones and travel. West Coast often gets overlooked for friendlies, especially if they are, major friendly windows involving Euro-based players. And I get that because these guys are flying from anywhere from, London and Madrid to Milan and Frankfurt, so you are trying to reduce travel even once they get into the country. You don't want to have them then go across another country and 3 more time zones to it. So I, personally, you can disagree. I understand why for a lot of the major friendlies, we don't go to the West Coast. Am I wrong for making that too much of an excuse or giving them credit too much?
Well, I think I think there's opportunities to do that in certain windows, right? So if you have a June window where it's just a friendlies, you could make it work, right? Because again, seasons are over for teams, so there's not that real club concern to say, well, geez, I don't want my players coming back exhausted. See, and the U.S. would do they were strategic for a long time, and maybe just the way it fell, but they did have World Cup qualifiers, and they're like, okay, we're going to play Mexico in the second leg of this window. We're going to play in Colorado, or we're going to play in Utah, right? Because we're going to play at elevation. So they would use it to their advantage, but when you have friendlies, you don't need to do that. So they could be going out west. I personally don't want them playing out there because I don't want to, wait till 11 o'clock at night to watch the match. But they could do that more often. Again, this is where CONCACAF could, there is a partnership there. When they have these Gold Cup matches, they're not scheduling a lot of West Coast type of matches either, for the fans in general. So U.S. is not going to set up camp out there and be traveling out there unnecessarily because it's not going to benefit them in the tournament.
It's one of those things where, there's that old saying, where there's a will, there's a way. Has either of you ever seen the second Sicario movie, Day of the Soldado?
No,
not as good as the original Sicario. The original Sicario, 10 out of 10. The second one, I'd give it 7.5, 8 out of 10. But there's a scene where Matthew Modine is the Secretary of Defense, and he brings Josh Brolin in to, discuss doing some shady stuff. He's like, hey, when you were in, this region of the world, these tactics, these underhanded tactics, they worked for you there. Do you think they can work here doing what we want you to do here? And Josh Brolin says, if you want it to, sir, and you have to want to do it. And the lack of effort and where there's a will, there's a way. And when you tell me there's no way, that leads me to believe there is no will.
All right. Well, I had on my list CONCACAF chooses venues. We talked about that, but I do think now is a great time to insert into this conversation the 2025 Gold Cup venues, because I think this highlights again the issue that we talked about, where yes, CONCACAF chooses the venues, but we know that U.S. Soccer is very much
it's
driving the selection. So you look at the 2025 venues for the CONCACAF Gold Cup. BC plays in Vancouver. U.S. isn't playing there, obviously. No. Levi Stadium in Santa Clara, PayPal Park in San Jose, so kind of the same region, using an NFL and an MLS stadium. Same in LA, you have SoFi, and then Dignity Health Sports Park, aka the LA Galaxy Stadium, aka Home Depot Center. And then you go down and you have Snapdragon in San Diego, Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, State Farm in Glendale, Arizona / Phoenix, then Q2 Stadium in Austin, AT&T in Arlington, Shell Energy in Houston, NRG in Houston, St. Louis City Park in St. Louis, and US Bank Stadium in Minneapolis. Now, if I were a betting man, Lawrence, I would put big money on the U.S. playing in Minneapolis at US Bank Stadium. Maybe not the opener, but whatever group stage weekend match.
I was going to say, I could see that being the Saturday.
Yeah.
Game.
Well, if it's the Saturday, whatever the Saturday or Sunday game is, if it's the opener or just the middle, whatever that is, I'm going to put money on that being the location for the U.S. playing there. But I think there's two other stadiums and cities that jump off the map, literally, that they're playing at as well.
Yeah, that's and the day they announced these, we had this discussion on Twitter. So I used to be a betting man. I haven't been able to be a betting man in about a year.
I did win a bet this year. I bet that the U.S. would beat Germany in the Olympics, and I won $20. So
okay. Hey, it's when you go.
I happened to be in Vegas, literally the day of the game. I said, "Yeah, we'll put some money on that."
When you go to the casino and you walk out with more money than you walked in with,
I didn't walk out with more money.
Day.
I won that bet.
Oh, okay. Well,
I won that bet. I've been lost,
and then Vegas took over, and you gave it all back. So they are not. If you're picking an NFL stadium, it's going to be the U.S. or Mexico playing there. And they're not
right.
They're not putting Mexico and Minnesota. Mexico is going to play Houston, Jerry World, and Phoenix with their knockout round games in Vegas and SoFi. That's how that's going to go. So Trinidad Tobago v. Costa Rica is not going to be at US Bank Stadium in Minneapolis. So that's going to be a U.S. game, which brings us back to the U.S. has already played Minneapolis, I think, 3 times since 2019, since Allianz Field opened up for Minnesota United. So
they
the other
played
two
twice
that jumped,
there. Yeah, this would be the 3rd time. Yeah.
I think. Let's see.
No, 3 times is it open. You're right. Correct. Yes, this is.
Yes. They played a Gold Cup game against Guyana.
Yep.
That was the one game where we were all convinced that Tyler Boyd was the next big thing. Then they had a friendly, and then remember they had the 25 below zero World Cup qualifier there, where Greg Berhalter did the totally staged selfie with the fans. Let's not go down that road. I'll get too upset. But you mentioned 2 other stadiums jump right off the map. What are the 2 remaining stadiums the U.S. is playing in this year? City Park in St. Louis, Q2 Stadium in Austin.
Yeah.
You keep all 3. Those are all 3 in the Central Time Zone. You're not all over the map, and you ensure happy coincidence CONCACAF just happened to give U.S. soccer venues that they love playing in.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how that's going to happen. I can see your 3 group games, whatever order: Minneapolis at US Bank, St. Louis at City Park, Austin at Q2 Stadium, and I'm sure one of the knockout round games will be at Snapdragon in San Diego, because that's one it's big enough that it'll be a good big crowd, but it's not so big that 35,000 people get swallowed up, because one fun little nugget. Shell Energy Stadium in Houston has, since it opened in 2012, will have played host to every single Gold Cup in that time.
Which I will say, it's a great venue. I've been there. It is a nice stadium in the city. It's a nice stadium, right? I'm not saying it's great, but like, it's downtown. You can walk there from the downtown area. You can, it's on the whatever fake public transit line they have that doesn't even go to the airport, but it's there. So, but you know who doesn't play there a lot?
The U.S.
The U.S. And that's the other thing, is they choose Austin all the time, and not Houston.
Well, Austin's the shiny new toy.
I know.
It's I don't. It's one of those things. The cynic in you wonders what promises are made.
That's a point coming up. That's a point coming up.
Well, then I'll hold it. Then I'll hold it.
But Thomas, this is also an issue that when you look at this list of stadiums, it feels like it was copy and pasted from the 2023 Gold Cup, which I think is the other underlying issue that isn't necessarily a U.S. soccer problem. But CONCACAF hosts a damn tournament it feels like 3 months, So when you're playing a Gold Cup every 2 years, with for a region that is, very, located, and most of the fans are going to be from Central America. Let's just put it that way, right? That's where most of your teams are located. The teams that are qualifying, obviously Mexico being the big draw. So, I mean, I feel like except for like PayPal Park, all of those stadiums and US Bank, all of those stadiums were part of last year's or 2023's Gold Cup. And that is also kind of the problem that we get into, is we're doing this all the time.
Well, that's the thing. It's a rinse, wash, repeat for CONCACAF, right? I mean, there's a reason why the United States is, the primary host of the Gold Cup forever, pretty much, right? And so it's because that's where the numbers are, right? That's where the venues are. So they're not going to be overly creative. They're gonna, again, they're kind of gonna set the tone for the United States and Mexico. Here are your venues. Here we're gonna kind of set it up, because that's really the matchup most people probably want to see at the end of the day in the final. So it's become a stale kind of tournament. Maybe this one, if it does include different, nations, who knows? It's going all over the place. Maybe it's a little bit more exciting, but you have to make it more of an event as opposed to just like, yeah, we got one in 2 years, you know what I mean? And it's going to be the B team or the A team, playing in it. And I think
it better be the A team next year. They ain't got nothing else to do.
The A team.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the thing. Like, the whole thing is just kind of, it's become a joke, right? It's become a joke because it's really, it's not the premier tournament anymore for CONCACAF, and you can kind of see it from even their venue selections a little bit. In general, they're just, they're kind of just going back to what works for them, and I get that. I guess if you're getting the fans and stuff, but
don't forget, we have the Nations League final in March, because we have to play that every year. And if I were a betting man, again, I'm not really, but I would pick one of the big NFL stadiums that has a roof to be the location for the semifinals and finals of the CONCACAF Nations League.
Where are there a lot of Mexican fans? NFL stadiums with
Houston, roofs. Arlington, Vegas, LA. That's maybe Phoenix. That's the outlier. Possibly Phoenix. They haven't played there yet for the Nations League final. It wouldn't surprise me if they do. But
they had the new and elite Continental Classico there last year.
They did do that. Yeah.
I think one complicating factor, at least this year, which is not to suggest that CONCACAF, U.S. Soccer, and the FMF would, branch out radically in their venue selection, is we've got the Club World Cup here next summer at the exact same time as well,
and that's the other issue.
Which I'm stoked about, because, that gives you another big high-level tournament. Well, we'll see how high-level, but another big tournament to get people so excited for the 2026 World Cup. And they're obviously they picked Seattle because the Sounders have already qualified, and they picked LA because outside
have
of the
enough
United
stadiums.
States, people think LA is the only city in the country.
There's 3. You have LA,
LA,
Miami,
and
and
New
New York.
York.
Yeah.
And if you're from South America, you include Miami.
Yeah. Speaking of those venues, are Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, TQL in Cincinnati, Hard Rock in Miami, Geodis in Nashville, MetLife in New Jersey, Bank of America in Charlotte, Camping World in Orlando, Inter and Co Stadiums, formerly Exploria Stadium, formerly Orlando City Stadium in Orlando, the Rose Bowl out in LA, Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia, Lumen in Seattle, as you pointed out, and then Audi Field in DC. So a little bit more diverse than we're normally used to seeing. I mean, Charlotte has hosted some matches, but like as you pointed out, they obviously wanted to keep, for the most part, the Club World Cup mostly on the East Coast because your bigger audiences are Europe. As well as South America, which really lines up more from a time zone perspective with the East Coast. And then you kept West Coast for your Gold Cup because that's where a lot of the fans who will be attending the Gold Cup have, either immigrated to or exist already. / it's just easier for them also for time zone for watching because Mexico and all those places are more aligned with the Central and Pacific time. So that is another, obviously, an element to all of this is that CONCACAF host tournaments, like I jokingly say every 3 months, but like last year we had the Nations League final. We have another Nations League final this year as well, upcoming this year. We have, Gold Cup again next year. Like they just do this all the time because they're an organization that pretends to want to help soccer in these small countries. Definitely not line their own pockets. That's never happened in this region ever before.
No.
We talked also about this reason, and I do think that there is value to this idea, but I'm going to spin it in a different way. So we talked about the familiarity with venues and facilities. I'm just going to say that it's more about, to me, yes, there are some that they like, but it's good to play in soccer-specific stadiums, not just to promote the newly built stadiums and the new clubs, because I think we all know that is a big reason. But Thomas, I think there is value in playing in a stadium built for the sport you're playing.
Yeah, the atmosphere is completely different. I mean, it's more intimate. It's just designed for that. It's great for the fans. It's great for the players. I don't think the players really care all that much, but maybe there is a say. Maybe the players are like, yeah, we love playing in Minnesota. If you can get it there, great. We'll play there. Like there may be an element to that as well, right? Because we've been successful. We're comfortable with that. Because think about that. The player might say, hey, geez, you know what? We want to go to this venue because you're like a restaurant there or something. Who knows? But there could be an element that exists where the players are being
why they keep them out of Atlanta, because we got too many restaurants I want to be going to.
But there may be something there. It's like, hey, here are the 3 venues we're considering
Magic City
over the next 3 windows. Any of them interest you?
Well, and that's a good point because look, we knocked Berhalter for it, but that's a good point, Thomas. He mentioned specifically in the 2022 qualifying cycle about Columbus having a venue they liked and like having facilities they like. And I get that. If they have really good, from practice facilities to their training table room is great, and it's an easy walk from the locker room to the tunnel that you walk out of. Like I can understand that for competitive matches. So the problem though, as you hit, is, but why are we keep going back to these? It's a friendly. It doesn't matter. We don't need to have that type of familiarity.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem, right? I think that's where they lose it a little bit, is that competitive match piece of it, right? Like where you talk about all this other stuff, and it comes back to us like, well, these are competitive matches. Why can't we try something new? And I don't know, logistically, is it more challenging to get certain venues in this, September, October, November window because of football season? I don't know. I'm sure there's something there. For sure. But
like Atlanta, Los Angeles, Seattle, Foxborough aren't going to have a lot of open dates. You're right about that.
Right. But to me, that's just another excuse. They could make it happen in other windows, like the March or the January window, June
They have
window.
played many games back to back. I know this for sure. Atlanta United on a Saturday and Falcons on 1 p.m. on a Sunday. So
Right, it's
they can do
doable.
that
It's just a
there.
matter if they want to do it, right? And I don't think they want to. I just don't think they want to go through the the challenges of doing that necessarily.
And this summer would have been the perfect time to do that. I mean, I didn't mind the artist formerly known as FedEx Field in Landover, Maryland, outside of DC.
The literal
as
sewage dump.
Oh, that one, yeah,
Hate that stadium.
that's why they didn't get World Cup games. But I didn't mind that venue selection. That's a stadium you hadn't been to since 2012, in a city
And we
that
don't
you
play in
hadn't
the
been
DC
to.
area like at
Yeah,
all.
Except they did it back to back, and they did it twice in 2019 at Audi Field,
Right,
and they
which
haven't
is
been
weird,
back since.
which is not a
'cause
good
both
stadium.
those crowds stunk.
Well, Audi is a terrible stadium.
But
Great location, terrible stadium.
But you didn't need to play Brazil and Orlando. I understand there's a lot of Brazilians in Florida. I get that part of it. But you've played Orlando at whatever the Inter Miami, not Inter Miami, but the
Inter Miami
Inter
Stadium in Orlando. Yeah.
That one. Why you picked the name of a company that shares a name of another team in your state? I don't understand. Money, but you didn't need to play at the Citrus Bowl at Camping World Stadium. You could have gone somewhere else. And it's not like
a lot of places
it's not like because it was close to DC where you just played, or it was close to Dallas where you were playing your Copa America game. No, you just picked it because you like Orlando and there were Brazilian fans there. That's a game that could very easily have been played in Pittsburgh. Like I would love to see the U.S. men's national team play a game in Pittsburgh. The Riverhounds are one of the more successful, more well-supported teams in the USL Championship.
With their own stadium.
I understand it's turf, and we'll touch on that later. It's a smaller stadium, yes, but you could play at Heinz Field in June. Well, it's not Heinz Field anymore, but you could play there in June.
It's Heinz. It's always Heinz.
The U.S. women's team in 2015 drew 45,000 people there. You don't think people would be going bonkers to see the U.S. men's national team play, but right before Copa America, a big, possibly successful summer of soccer, that's again, to Thomas's point, you could have found a way to go somewhere new for one of these summer friendlies if you wanted to play an NFL stadium that you hadn't been to. Last I checked, the NFL isn't playing games in their home stadiums in June. So like I just picked Pittsburgh. You mentioned Charlotte getting Club World Cup games. The U.S. men's national team had never played in Charlotte, and they played a Gold Cup game last year and drew 42,000 people for it. So like this is not this. We're not all three just making this up. This is real. Like when people finally get an opportunity to go see this team, they go see them.
Correct. One of those, to build off that, is another excuse or a reason is that U.S. Soccer may put out a request for proposal, RFP, and who knows which stadiums and cities are responding, right? We don't know. And so it's maybe an excuse, but it's definitely a reason that not every stadium is bidding to host games. I can say, for example, in talking with the Atlanta United beat reporter, Doug Roberson, that, I was asking him, I point blank, he comes to the bar that I watch soccer at a lot. I said, well, why doesn't Mercedes-Benz get any games? Why don't we get a US game or even, Gold Cup? And he's like, well, they haven't bid for it. They haven't they haven't put in the bid proposal. And, to be fair, they hosted some Mexico friendlies and some Premier League friendlies, but, so there is also a reason, these stadiums do have to want to bid, but is that really, like you said, where there's a will, there's a way?
To me, it is incumbent upon U.S. Soccer to make them interested in bidding on these games, to tell them this, not only is this good for us, but it's good for you. Because it may be a case where they don't, like we talked about earlier, the people in the city, in whatever city, might not know the national team is there until they've picked up and left town because they're just like, hey, we're here, come see us. And they're not making it an event. So you, as U.S. Soccer, need to reach out to these people and like in all these various stadiums. It could be I have floated the idea because somebody floated it to me several years ago. I don't remember who it was, so I can't credit them. But I would love to see in the run up to the 2026 World Cup, the U.S. men's national team play a bunch of friendlies in college football stadiums. We saw Mexico play Brazil at Texas A&M Stadium this summer. We saw Liverpool and Manchester United play each other at South Carolina Stadium this summer. We saw Manchester City and Chelsea play at Ohio State. We saw Celtic and Chelsea play at Notre Dame. Notre Dame hosted Liverpool and Dortmund a couple of years in 2019. That's something is U.S. Soccer. You need to get on the ball and get ahead of this and be like, hey, in May, mid to late May, early June, would you be interested in hosting this? Let us know what you think. If you're not picking up the phone and calling all of these people and asking them to bid, they're never going to bid because they don't know that the event even exists. Like it would not. How many times do people in any walk of life not do something until somebody relays to them, hey, this is something you should look into. I can't believe I never looked into this before. Why did it take me so long to do this? That's as U.S. Soccer. I feel that it is their responsibility to try to get. I understand if they call them, say, hey, what do you want to do? What do you need from us? We don't want to do it. Okay, if they don't want to do it, they don't want to do it. But you need to pick up the phone. And I know they haven't picked up the phone because when these discussions happen, they get leaked. Reports come out. And there are no reports about the U.S. calling Boise State to play on the Smurf turf. There are no reports leaking out about, they're not calling the Steelers to play in Pittsburgh. They're not calling the Riverhounds to play in Pittsburgh. They're not calling this stuff would leak out, and it doesn't. They're not doing it. They need to do it. It would be good for them. It would be good for the fans. It would be good for the venues that host. I would say Indianapolis is one they should be on the phone with all the time. Mm-hmm. Indy 11 is one of the best supported teams in the USL Championship. Lucas Oil Stadium, like the town of Indy, is a big-time sports town. You wouldn't think it, but they've got an NFL team. They've got an NBA team. I just mentioned they have a USL Championship team. They have one of probably the most popular team in the WNBA right now. They've got, they've hosted a Super Bowl. They host the Final Four every 5 years.
Playoffs.
They hosted the national championship game. They host the Big Ten championship game every single year. Yep. I feel like I heard you mention one time I know they did this. They hosted Olympic swimming qualifying and drew 25,000 people.
Yes.
Are you telling me that
year for the last Olympics? Yep.
Are you telling me the U.S. men's national team wouldn't draw 25,000 people to Lucas Oil Stadium? I think it would probably be a lot more than that. So U.S. Soccer needs to get on the stick here and start making some phone calls.
And Thomas, I think the word that Lawrence used a lot was event. And that goes back to your point of if you make this an event, more cities and stadiums will want to host it because they'll see the value. Indianapolis will see the value of bringing the U.S. men's national team to Lucas Oil because they can say, oh, man, we're going to get 45, 60,000 people in Lucas Oil for a soccer game. Sounds awesome.
Well, right. I mean, you look at what they've done with the, presenting these, player capped jerseys to the older players, right?
Yeah.
Well, they're doing that presentation to the players. Like there's an opportunity there to bring it to the fans, right? Like, the players there, hey, you have an event, right? The player would be happy to do that. They would be happy to help support that. And I think that's the thing. You can make it at least a two evening event, right? Obviously the match night, maybe you have watch parties around the city or something. Like think of it's not that difficult of a concept, but I don't know if they're just, again, you get the city on board. It's going to bring an influx of money. People want to be around the events. Even if they can't go to them, they want to be around that. And they want to be around those soccer fans because it is an awesome environment, either if you're at the match or you're at a bar watching it, with other supporters. It's awesome. So I don't know. To me, it just seems almost too simplistic for them not to do it. But yeah, the event piece of it, to me, it's a no-brainer. You can make that and make it just an awesome environment. I mean, look at all these soccer fests that they have, that they're bringing around, right? I mean, you're promoting the World Cup and doing it in this moment, right? So why? To me, it's a no-brainer. They're just Maybe they're just not that creative. I don't know.
Well, they might not be. I think it's fair, a little bit fair, to say that U.S. Soccer is not necessarily running like a Fortune 500 company. They're not the most robust full-time staff, but there's still opportunity to get people together and come up with ideas and say, hey, where do we want it? Like, I mean, at their AGM or, whatever meeting they're going to have at the end of this year, why aren't you pitching, hey, give me 5 cities that we haven't been to in a while, we haven't been to in the past 10 years or ever, that we should go to, and like you said, Lawrence, like Pittsburgh, hey, they've got a 60,000 seat stadium, a city that loves sports. I mean,
Yes.
that is a sports crazed town.
Mm-hmm.
Haven't been there. They played in Philly or in Pennsylvania a lot. In Philly, they played in Harrison or Harrisburg. Sorry, not Harrison, Harrisburg.
When did they play in Harrisburg?
I feel like they did. I don't. That I could be wrong.
That must have been many moons ago.
Well, I'm not saying it was recent.
I
feel like that was on there. But anyway, whatever. They played in Philly a heck of a ton.
Mm-hmm.
Go to the opposite side of the state. That state is long. It's big. That seems to be what we're asking here, is just to be slightly more pro in bringing the national team to the nation. All right, so I want to close up with some solutions. So I'm going to pitch a solution to this problem. I'll have Thomas pitch a solution. I'll have Lawrence pitch a solution, and then we'll talk about future sites that we would like to see them at, and not very future. We're talking like before 2026. So my solution is leverage the soccer-specific stadiums you have in this country. And while this may not get you to new soccer markets, it at least brings the team to new regions. For example, Portland. I know that it's turf. Figure it out. But Portland is a wonderful stadium with 25,000 seats that are begging to be filled for a U.S. men's national team. Right now, there are 22 total MLS soccer-specific stadiums in the U.S., plus a couple in NWSL and USL. And by 2026, we're going to have at least 4 new soccer-specific stadiums. One of those being, by the way, in New York City, which we haven't played in God knows how long. Have we played there ever, Thomas? I feel like you mentioned we've played there, but like never. Maybe we haven't played there.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. Let me just see. I'll bring it up real quick.
This is before we cared about actual stadium size.
Didn't they play on Staten Island in like the early 80s?
So I mean, that's what we're talking about here, right? Like when they were playing in small stadiums.
Yeah, they played in Yankee Stadium in 1953 against England and got lost 3-6, and then they played 1968 against Israel at Yankee Stadium. So they played in Brooklyn. They played in Ransdale Island. So I mean they've played, but it's the 84
right before anybody in this country cared about soccer.
Right. I mean they just played there. And mostly I think England twice, Canada twice, in New York, city area, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's just it's not really a venue they've frequented very often.
I mean, that's just my solution, is leverage the soccer stadiums you have. I know they're not new. It's not like it would be new if the U.S. men's national team played in Dick's Sporting Good Park in Denver, right? But maybe that's an opportunity to not just reach fans in that area, but
I don't think they've been to Dick's Sporting Goods Park since 2017.
They haven't been there in a while. I agree.
No, they did have.
What I'm saying,
they did have the Nations League final in Denver in 21, but that was at Empower Field. Is it called Empower, or did they switch it back to Sports
Mile High?
Authority?
I'm just gonna call it Mile
High. Okay.
One that they don't play at enough, in my opinion, is Red Bull Arena. I mean, I know that again, U.S. Soccer wants to manipulate the crowd so that it's a pro-U.S. crowd, but for a friendly, I don't care. You can play at
There
Red
are
Bull.
no you're not qualifying for anything. You're already
right. I
qualified.
don't care. Like you want to play in the New York area, go play at Red Bull. Like those are just some ideas that are like they exist. You have a soccer stadium, play there. So that's my solution here is just use the soccer specific stadiums. Lawrence, I think you talked maybe a little bit about college football. Is that your solution?
That and again, this is all just in the short term up to 2026. Obviously, once we get past the 2026 World Cup, I wouldn't necessarily mind a reversion to the mean as much. But yeah, like that, because I think that is something that on the clubs, on the European club side, they're starting to figure out about, because I feel like the passion of college football would mesh very well with the passion of high level international soccer. And so that is a great way, in my opinion, to be able to take the national team to new fans, because these cities and towns, like they're not big. Auburn, Alabama, or Tuscaloosa, Alabama, is not a big city, by any stretch of the imagination. But yet they get 100,000, 101,000 people in there, 7 times a year in 2 months. So, and that would allow you to go to places that you otherwise probably wouldn't allow yourself to go to because you need it to be a big major metropolitan area. Like,
I'm gonna put this out there as well. We're in the era of NIL, and I tell you who also benefits from NIL: soccer players. There's an opportunities there. I'm just saying. Saying.
But think about it. The United States has the men's national team has never played in the state of Nebraska. You can go to Lincoln and play at Memorial Stadium.
Isn't that funny? The birthplace of Omaha or Lincoln, Nebraska, the birthplace of the American Outlaws, the largest supporters group in this country for the U.S. or for the U.S. national teams. They've never played in that even state, let alone that city. So you could get 90,000 or 80,000 for a volleyball game, which I understand why. You can make something happen for soccer.
But and you could, and this isn't quite college football, but this is the one NFL stadium that I feel like matches the things that make college football stadium special. Go to Lambeau Field.
Yeah.
And that is.
You haven't played in Wisconsin in God knows how long.
And the last time they played in Wisconsin, it's been so long since they played in Wisconsin that the man who was the American president is dead. The country that they played is no longer a country, and the stadium they played in has been gone for a long time.
I'm assuming they played in the Milwaukee.
Yeah, the old Brewers
Stadium,
old Brewer Stadium. Yes, they played East Germany, and George H.W. Bush was the president of the United States.
Holy cow! Holy cow!
But Lambeau Field is grass, which again, we'll touch on this in a minute. In the short term, I don't care. But it is grass. It is a large venue, and you get people from all over the world going to Green Bay Packers games all the time. Like those are tough tickets to get. You want to talk about event? The U.S. men's national team playing somebody like Germany at Lambeau Field would be huge. And they've hosted soccer. Manchester City and Bayern Munich played a game there and drew 82,000 people. Fun little tidbit. You can see by my shirt here that it says Mississippi Soccer Referee Association. For those that don't know, I've been a referee for 18 years. A fellow Mississippi referee had the whistle for that game. He's a guy named Matt Thompson. He was the USL Referee of the Year 2 years ago. And we asked him about it. He said he's not gonna lie, little bit nervous. Never been in never done a game in a stadium that big or with that level of player.
Yeah.
But
even the backups who are playing in that game are a little bit higher than the USL guys.
But
yeah,
I don't know if this is like going to college football. It's fun to talk about, and I understand there are probably some complications with that. But I'm a huge college football fan. Obviously, I'm a huge soccer fan. I feel like the marrying of the two would make me personally a very happy camper.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think one that legitimately does make sense is Lincoln. I think that would be a great way to get to Nebraska in that area. We talked about Indianapolis. Another one could possibly just be going to Notre Dame. Go up to South Bend and play at Notre Dame Stadium.
I'm a Notre Dame football fan. That would make my heart very happy.
I know. I don't want to give too much credit to Notre Dame. They ruined my beloved Big East Conference. So, there's also, think about, we haven't played in Detroit in forever because there's not a quote suitable location, but like you have East Lansing, which is like 10 miles outside of that, which has an 80,000 seat stadium for the Spartans. And then you have
how
the
many
Big
times
House.
have we've seen 100,000 plus crowds at the Big House every like 3 or 4 summers in a row.
Yeah, I think in that situation, I think US doesn't want to see. The problem is these bigger stadiums. I think they're nervous they won't sell. Right?
I don't care if you won't sell out. I don't need you to sell out 80,000 seats.
I don't care. You don't care, but they care, right? They care about it.
They're not selling out the 15,000 seat stadiums anyway.
I know, but they're comfortable with it. Trust me, they're just a weird, security blanket around. What they're selecting. I mean, they just don't want to go.
It makes no sense that we're all rational people. I don't know that anybody's ever seen.
Yeah, to me, if U.S. Soccer were to come out and say, "Hey, we can't do this because X, Y, Z," right? You may not believe it, but at least they're coming out and saying, "Hey, you know what? This is why we're not playing at college stadiums because it's challenging for us to get them interested in doing this." I would get that, but they're not even doing that. They're just blatantly just ignoring it, and there's a lot of noise, around, venue selection.
Thomas, what is your solution to this problem then?
I said it earlier, and I'll go back to it. Especially leading up to the World Cup, making an event, give some sort of incentive, special edition jersey that the players will wear that you can only buy at that match, right?
Do like rally towels or something.
Yeah, but make it an event for that and say, wow, I've got to get to this match. Mm-hmm. Like I've got to get there. I want this jersey that's only going to be worn one time, in this match, and you can only get it, at this match, or you're going to get some triple extra large, online when they, try to get rid of the rest of them or whatever it is. But they can make a limited edition and special edition. They've done that in the past, and I think that would help the diehards and other fans say, hey, let's just go. Let's try to get there, and they would maximize revenue too. I think they could really benefit for that, but again, it's too much work for them, I think.
Well, we have been talking a long time, but we're going to continue to talk because we feel very passionate about this. And I think, again, we all agree that the goal in the short term and the long term, but the short term goal specifically is driving hype and growing, like not just hype in the cities that are going to host the World Cup, but making sure the entire country feels the hype for the 2026 World Cup, and specifically feels the hype for the men's national team, because that is how they'll stick, not just as U.S. men's national team fans, but hopefully soccer fans and participants in the sport in this country. So this is the exercise we're going to do now. You both have written great articles talking about this problem, right? Lawrence, you wrote one back in 2022 for World Soccer Talk, where you write a lot about, hey, the U.S. just hasn't branched out and played in a lot of states, recently. Certainly they've been playing in a lot, but the same states over and over again, but haven't gone to these states. Thomas, you did another one for Chasing a Cup more recently, exploring the states they have, where they've been regionally and on all that. And then how do we get to new places, and specifically some places we've never been before. You both made lists, and there is an overlap of 10 that I want to talk about. And what we're going to do is I'm going to read the 10 cities, and then I'm going to have you pick 2 from that list that you want to see the U.S. play in before 2026. So here we go. Birmingham, Alabama, Little Rock, Arkansas, Honolulu, Hawaii, Boise, Idaho, Indianapolis, Indiana, Louisville, Kentucky, New York City, New York, Buffalo, New York, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Portland, Oregon. So Thomas, from that list of 10, give me 2 cities you need the U.S. to play in before 2026.
My first is Indiana. I think Lawrence spoke to it earlier, but it's a venue that, or an area specifically that's very passionate for soccer in this country. The national team has never played there. They played Olympic qualifiers there, I believe, in '92
Yeah,
and
like
'87, and
at
then they
the
did a Pan
Ui Pui
American.
Stadium. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the Pan American games in '87 as well. They played there. So like I think that's for me one, and I'm gonna go a little bit further north. I'm gonna go Buffalo, New York. I mean I think that's I mean I'm thinking more that my piece in it was based on their new stadium that they're building, but I think that's a spot that's still within the U.S. soccer comfortability range in terms of you know East Coast or Central area, so it's in that area. Hey, look, they like playing in the cold. They did it in Minnesota. Why not? Why not do it again in Buffalo? Right?
Can you imagine the Bills Mafia at a U.S. men's national team game? Oh boy.
Oh, well,
Yeah, I mean they've got passionate. I mean, there's got to be passionate soccer fans up there. There has to be. I mean, it only suggests there would be with the football crazes that are there.
Lawrence. So we have Indianapolis and Buffalo off the list.
Mhm.
What are two of your cities that we need to go to before
off
2026?
off of the list where we've got the overlap, I'm going to be selfish and pick the two. And I'm going to preface this by saying we both picked these same city. We both have them on our list. So I think this is not to slight any of these other cities because we're both already on record saying they need to go here.
Right.
I'm going to be selfish. I'm going to pick the two that would benefit me the most as I'm in the Memphis area.
Do it.
So I'm going to pick Birmingham and I'm going to pick Little Rock. I have covered a game at the new Protective Stadium in Birmingham. The venue itself is very nice. The problem is the people running the show down there for the Legion or whoever owns the stadium don't know their elbow from their asshole. It was a mess. But the U.S. men's national team played a World Cup qualifier against Guatemala, I believe, in 2005 at the old Legion Field. Legion Field was old and outdated the day they opened it, and by 2005 was just a hellhole. And they still drew 31,000 people in Birmingham, Alabama in 2005. So I think that's a place you need to go back to. And then Little Rock, that's in the Central Time Zone. That's a place you've never been before. I have been to War Memorial Stadium one time. It is a little bit of an old venue. But again, this might be the best place for me to say this. In the lead up to 2026, we are, with the whole discussion of this, is we are hyper focused on taking the national team to as many new and different places as possible. I don't care about turf. I don't care about baseball fields. I don't care about field dimensions. I don't care about stadium size. I don't care about any of it. I understand long term that's not a viable solution. I understand that. I am talking for the next year and a half. Don't care. Go wherever. And I believe War Memorial and Little Rock and Birmingham are both turf. Don't care. You can put sod down. You can just play on the turf. Again, this is the ensuring the growth of the game is much more important than playing one game in front of the scary turf monster. So for me, in the Memphis area, it's 3 hours to Birmingham. It's 2.5 hours to Little Rock.
Yeah.
So if they were to do like a back-to-back in the two, I would just like, I just pass out and die with a smile on my face.
I will say too about specifically Birmingham is it's a 42,000 seat stadium, which is it's basically the same type of stadium but modern as what you saw in Connecticut at whatever Pratt and Whitney Stadium at whatever it is now. We played there last year against Germany, and I'm telling you, Protective and UConn are very similar types of venues, right? They're college venues. They're not big, but they're big enough to have a good sized crowd. And we saw the passion when they finally played in Rentschler Field. That's what it used to be called, not Pratt and Whitney. We're going to call it by its OG name, Rentschler Field. And that, I think, to your point, would be really nice, right? Like, I love Thomas talking about Indianapolis getting the big stadium.
Absolutely.
Right? That'll be great. You can get a lot of people.
You would not hear me complain if Indy got a game.
Yeah, well, obviously. But, like, you could do Indianapolis for the big, I mean, we're talking big, get the big opponent, bring them to Indianapolis. But, like, maybe that same window you're playing, for example, Germany and Ghana, right? Okay, well, Ghana, play them in Birmingham. I mean,
Right
it's
down
small enough.
65 from Indy. It's
Yeah.
right down
Well,
65.
actually, that's a good point. See, we're making solutions already. All right. My two, I mentioned one already, is Portland, Oregon. I don't know why we feel the need to be scared of Portland and the turf monster, as you said. That could be a stadium you easily put sod in for a game. And that is, in my opinion, they are historically and still to this day the most passionate group of fans. And I'm not talking just the supporters, I'm talking fans, period, in American soccer. So I think we need to go to Portland. The other one that I know we all would agree, and I understand the stadium is not as big. Go to Louisville. The women are playing there. Go to Louisville. This is where I don't mind rewarding a team for building a soccer stadium and building a nice club. We got this with San Antonio earlier this year. It was great. Go to Louisville. I don't care if it's a, cupcake game. That's fine.
And that would be the perfect time to go to a smaller stadium as a
Yes.
January camp game.
Yes.
When ticket sales have already proven at all these other stadiums that, how many times have they drawn 9,000 people to Dignity Health Sports Park for a January camp game?
Right.
I remember Greg Berhalter's first game in charge. They drew 8,000 people at State Farm Stadium in Phoenix. Go to and I think I'll give U.S. Soccer credit here. I think they might be starting to figure this out. Maybe they finally gotten coaching hires right, so that's one box checked. Now they need
got two in a row on that.
Yeah. Now they need to. Honestly, I think probably the next most important thing they need to figure out is Open Cup, and then stadium selection.
Yeah,
and
we could do a whole podcast on Open Cup.
Oh yeah, I cover a USL Championship team. Don't get me started.
I know.
But I think this last January camp, I think we maybe kind of saw them start to acknowledge maybe we should play these types of games in smaller stadiums. Because
I'll say
the largest
I saw
crowd,
the U.S. play Jamaica and Chattanooga
mm-hmm.
before the soccer stadium. I mean, that was a 20,000 seat Finley, but it's we know this is a smaller city and stadium, but it was a January camp game. It was very cold. There are very few places in this country that it wouldn't be cold in January, and LA is one of them. So, all right, let's move on to the next part of this. The wild card. Maybe it wasn't on that list of 10, but your wild card, Thomas, of where you think the U.S. should play before 2026.
Yeah, I'm gonna go South Carolina. It's one of the places they haven't played ever or in a long time. It's one of the higher populations. And we just saw a match in South Carolina this summer with Liverpool and Manchester United that sold out. So, that was played. Where was it played?
That was played at Williams-Brice. That's South Carolina Football's home stadium.
Right. So to me, the venue's there, right?
Now we're killing two birds with one stone. You get the marrying of soccer and football, college football, and a place that you've never been before.
Right. So what I mean? To me, that's a no-brainer. It checks the boxes. I want to see it there.
I'll also say I love that idea because Charlotte and Atlanta are very close drives, so you're not alienating people from Columbia, right? You can get. I will drive to Columbia, South Carolina I won't go there for many things, but I will go there for a U.S. soccer game. So I agree with that, Thomas. I love that pick. Also,
the Charleston Battery are one of the oldest clubs in America. They had the original soccer specific stadium, the old Black Baud Stadium, and
with the Three Lions pub. Yeah, man.
The men's and women's programs at both University of South Carolina and Clemson University are both very well supported. I think when Clemson and South Carolina played each other in men's college soccer earlier this year, I think they drew 7,000 people.
Yeah. I love that. So, okay, we got Columbia, South Carolina is one. Lawrence, what's your wild card that you think that they should play before 2026?
I'm going to cheat and pick two.
Okay.
Selfishly, Memphis, since I'm in the Memphis area. President of U.S. Soccer, Cindy Parlow-Cone from Memphis.
She is.
Tim Howard, former U.S. Goalkeeper, was a long time, it no longer is, but was a long time sporting director at Memphis 901 FC. So the connections there. Richard Mulrooney, head coach at the University of Memphis for the men's team, was a U.S. men's national team player for some time. So I'll pick Memphis. They are renovating the stadium formerly known as the Liberty Bowl for Tiger football, and I think that's going to make it much more. There have been rumblings, and I'm going to try to get into some people's ears about this, trying to get some sort of high-profile soccer game in there once, because the university now owns that stadium instead of the city of Memphis. Long story.
Memphis is what, 3 hours from Nashville?
Yes, it's
if memory serves me,
190.
Knoxville is 3 from Nashville, and Nashville is 3 from Memphis across I-40.
Yes, it's 199 miles down I-40. But on a more realistic note, I would say New Orleans. I understand Mauricio Pochettino's the new coach, but the vibes around this team it feels like very close to an all-time low. I still think October 10th, 2017 is the all-time low, but New Orleans is a world-renowned party town. And my God, does this team need something of a party atmosphere around it going into 26? So I say
the women played there back in what,
they
20?
They played at 2015 at the end of their victory tour after the Women's World Cup. Yeah. I think they drew like 38,000 people there for it. Like it was
Abby Wambach's Mike Drop speech. Yeah.
Yes. Even they lost that game, by the way.
Don't send Wes McKinney to that game. He will get into trouble, but everyone else is good to go. Maybe Malik Tillman also. Apparently, he's one to find trouble as well.
Like New Orleans is another one. They host the Super Bowl and the Final Four very regularly. They have also at various points throughout time hosted the SEC basketball tournament, so they know how to put on an event. And then that New Orleans is an Amtrak hub. So if people are wanting to ride the train, I've ridden the train from Memphis to New Orleans twice. It was a blast both times. It's the city of New Orleans. It was an Arlo Guthrie song. But no, those would be Memphis, just personally, selfishly, and then on a much more realistic note, I say New Orleans.
I'm gonna pick 2 because I am the host and I can cheat like that. My realistic one, the one that I actually think we should legitimately, as we've talked about it, is Pittsburgh. One, I love that city. I think it's a vastly underrated city, but the fact that it is it's far enough away from Philly, as well as far enough away from Cleveland and Columbus and Cincinnati, where it's not the same, but you can still pull from those people. Does that make sense? But you also have a lot of people in Western PA, in West Virginia, in Maryland, who, Eastern Ohio, who can get their way to Pittsburgh and play in a really cool stadium. One of the best settings and for sports is all 3 of their stadiums. You got, you've got PNC and you've got Hines on. Well, Hines is technically on the Ohio, but anyway, you got PNC on the Allegheny, you got Hines on the Ohio, and then you've got the Riverhound Stadium, Highmark, on the Monongalia River. So it's a beautiful setting. It's a great, fun city. You have a lot of sports passionate fans. So I would say Pittsburgh is the realistic one. My wild card, because they're building a new stadium that should be done by 2025, Providence, Rhode Island. It's going to be about 11,000, their new USL stadium there. And I'm just like, why not?
I like it.
Yeah, I'd be happy with that. I can make that Providence.
Right. I mean, it's one of those why else would you? There's no other reason to play in Rhode Island. Let's be real honest, because there's a million other places in that area you could play, but that'd be fun. No, I definitely think Pittsburgh, similar to you, Thomas, like Indianapolis. It's why not put it in a big stadium in a city that has always been close to all the other places they've played, right? Like Indianapolis, so close to Chicago, so close to all the Cincinnati and Columbus. Give them their own thing. Let them be the host. And that's kind of how I feel about Pittsburgh, is let them be the host. All right. Well, we've
Weston
officially
McKinney could cut a hell of a promo for the Primanti brothers.
Man, listen. Primanti's has both been the cause of hangovers and the solution to hangovers I had. They opened up a Primanti's in Morgantown when I was there at WVU, and Yeah, I spent a good minute there. But yeah, I mean, look, I also love Pittsburgh. It's a great food city. It's one of the most underrated food cities in the country. I think it's a better sandwich city than like anywhere else outside of maybe New York. But yeah, I do enjoy that city. I think we have officially solved all these problems. So I'm gonna just cut and record and send this to JT and Cindy since they're now like my neighbors, basically.
Mm. He's been making the media rounds too.
Yeah.
So
Hopefully. Thank you both for this discussion. I know we went a long time. I mean, we're almost at an hour and a half of recording, but this is just one of those topics of conversation that can't be covered fully in a blog article, in a segment of an episode, or anything. It is something that is not just a big problem now. It has continually been a problem throughout U.S. soccer's history of just kind of focusing on a state or a city or a handful of those to play in. The problem we have now is, as we've said, we've got a World Cup coming up in 2026, and we have to maximize its impact, because if we don't, we won't see this sport take off in this country the way we want it to. And we all love the sport. We all dedicate a lot of our lives to the sport, so we want it to do its best. Lawrence, tell the good folks where they can find all of your work, because you are busy. Let's put it that way.
yes, that's I am indeed. I am quite busy. But all of my just you can find me on my personal account at ldoc93 on Twitter. I write for World Soccer Talk. I write for Bluff City Media here in Memphis. I host the 901 Soccer Podcast, which mostly covers Memphis 901 FC and the USL Championship, but we'll also occasionally discuss U.S. national teams or the program, men's and women's programs at the University of Memphis. And then you can also follow over my joke that it's my burner account, but at 901 Soccer Pod is the official Twitter account of the 901 Soccer Podcast. It's if you follow me personally, you'll get all sorts of movies and history and college football and all sorts of stuff. But if you follow the 901 Soccer Podcast, that is 99.5% soccer.
Yeah, I have to do the same with my personal. I'm like, you don't want to come here for the ranting about WVU football, but go to Soccer for Us Pod to get actual things you care about. Thomas, you have anything coming up that we need to be aware of?
I don't. I had a request for an article. I've got to do some research on it, so we'll see how quickly I can put all that together. That's the biggest part with writing articles. It's the making sure we have the fact check research, and so that's sometimes you get down rabbit holes into other things, and you just can't finish it. So I'm working on something, but nothing that's unless I can hit the jackpot here in the next couple of days. Nothing.
Well, make sure you go to chasingacup.com for his work. That's where it is housed right now, especially the article about where the U.S. should play. You had another one out about goalkeepers recently, so that's very much worth reading as we head into a very uncertain time for U.S. goalkeepers, by the way. And you can follow me again on the Twitters at Soccer for Us Pod. Thomas and I, and maybe hopefully Caleb, will be talking about a roster drop next week. So hopefully we will have more U.S. soccer content coming to you. But in the meantime, also, please don't forget to go vote at footballcontentawards.com/voting. Vote for Soccer Down Here for the best media organization. All right. Well, thank you both for listening. Thank you for talking. Thank you all out there for listening. I'm Bart. I'm out.